This week in particular, to have a week of activity raising the whole profile of the importance of journalism, the future of newspapers, and particularly the importance of local news, the whole spectrum from national newspapers to local regional papers down to community media. I thought it would be worthwhile me flagging up what the Local News Matters campaign, what the targets that we've set, just with a view to try and setting aspirations and goals. And I'll just read them out, and they'll have varying impact on different people. But we are looking for a national parliamentary inquiry into the state of local news. So I think that's when they say national, I think they're probably talking UK there. But certainly, given that the Culture Minister is here today, I think there'll be some discussions about what can be done at Holyrood around this issue. Local papers should be treated as community assets. There should be new rules brought in to prevent local media outlets from closing. Unfortunately, we haven't seen too many newspapers in Scotland closing, but that's not the case south of the border, unfortunately, where a number of papers have been closed in the last 24 months in particular. So we need rules and regulations brought in to try and protect the closure of papers. They should be offered to potential new owners, including local cooperatives, with the time available to submit in a bid for alternative media ownership in advance of any closure. The protection of local media is essential. Local villages, local towns, local areas within cities need to have their diverse media, and we all have a duty to try and protect that media, and steps need to be taken. Something needs to be done to put protection in place. So we're looking for an action by the government and employers to stem the relentless job cuts. And Ian's obviously here from Johnson Press from
Media's integrity here too. We get caught up in that. Donald Trump has actually said that the American media have deliberately withheld reporting of terror incidents so that, for political reasons, for the media's political reasons, despite the fact there's no evidence for that either. So the whole idea of journalistic credibility, the journalistic values that we hold so dearly, we fought for, and others before us have held so dearly too, is under greater threat now than it ever has been in the past. Katy Perry's got 96 million followers on Twitter. Justin Bieber's got 92 million followers on Twitter. So I think that our values are under attack. So the question is, how do we respond? Well, as journalists, the first thing we have to do is uphold the highest possible ethical standards for our industry. We have to be sure, absolutely sure, that what we do conforms to all the things that we know will give us the credibility and authority, that people understand that we're speaking the truth, that we're telling things as they are, we're upholding fairness, balance, accuracy, all the things that mean that people trust us. We must have that trust. We must not let that trust go. They've got a bit of an uphill struggle because journalism has not got the best reputation now, which is a great shame because the redactions are very few, whereas the vast majority have always done things in a very ethical manner. However, we've got to climb back up that hill, and what we've got to do now is every single journalist has to be at all times behaving to the highest possible ethical standards. So the first thing I would say to the Westminster politicians is be mindful of business, be mindful of the economic pressures that newspapers are under. What they can't do is introduce regulatory controls that mean there's huge bureaucratic costs, because that will just impact on the economics of newspapers. And what they certainly can't do is bring about a situation where the libel costs and court costs of people who take newspapers to court, regardless of whether they win or not, are paid for by the newspapers. Theresa May, in that speech I mentioned earlier, when she was talking about the BBC and the threat of it, said that competition in the provision of news is essential to democracy. They need to understand the commercial realities of news, and they need to act in a way that is beneficial rather than makes that difficult for us. It needs to let the industry self-regulate. There can be no government interference. As soon as you have government interference in that regulation, in any form whatsoever, then you cease to be an independent press. I mean, you cannot cease to be independent, because the three cornerstones of their own democracy are independence and being free and their plurality. There have been a lot of other different outlets. So my final message for politicians is don't like what the press do. You don't have to like what the press do. You shouldn't like what the press do. You have to trust them to do their job. You have to respect the job that they do. And you have to actively support it. Get out there and actively campaign for a free press and do things in the interests of a free press. Don't just say that you think it's a vital part of democracy. Act like you think it's a vital part of democracy.
That if you don't have journalism, you can't have democracy. You have to have an informed populace for them to govern their own lives. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It's so taken for granted, it's self-evident. The political philosophers don't talk a lot about it because it's a given. Before you get to page 1 in attractive political philosophy, that's just assumed you get that. That's going to be there, because without that, nothing follows. It's never been an easy thing to get. It's always been under threat. In the United States, we've had some horrible experiences historically with journalism in crisis. One great period of crisis that led into the modern era came in World War I, when the United States became, I think, began its steps to becoming the dominant power in the world. And the U.S. government, for the first time, aggressively propagandized its population to try to get it to support entry into World War I and support for the U.S. role in World War I, when the vast majority of the population had no interest in it. And it engaged in explicit efforts to propagandize the population and basically spoon-feed the media lies, the news media, to get the people to gin up their hatred of Germans. And he noted that unless we get the issue of journalism right, unless we have a credible journalism that people can count on, it is impossible to maintain democratic privileges, democratic freedoms, democratic rights, the self-government. The governing system will collapse. And he said, it is inevitable you will end up with a tyranny and some sort of dictatorship. He said of the left or right, generally, but a dictatorship of one form or another. And I think history has borne him out. And I think for those of us today in this room, that should set us with great concern about what's going on in the world today. Because this is not an academic exercise that we're talking about. This is something, as we're seeing with the Trump administration, as we're seeing with political movements across Europe and really the world. This is high stakes, what we're going through with the collapse of journalism. The collapse of journalism is right at the bottom, at the center of the hurricane sweeping much of the world today. 3 issues, actually. One was, without an effective press, corruption runs rampant. You can't have government that works without a press that monitors it. We all understand that. Ian mentioned that. We all know that. That's self-evident again. But they got that then, and that's one of the reasons it was so central to the project of putting a free press in our system. Secondly, they were understood, much like Adams, that they looked at Europe for guidance here, that unless you had a press system, the idea of popular democracy, where those without property could actually participate effectively in governance, was a joke. That was the lifeline for democracy, for the bulk of the population, was having the information they needed to actively participate. And only a credible popular press system could make that possible. And third, and this is for Americans the most central issue today, and this is going to shock, I'm glad you're all sitting down. Believe it or not, when the United States was founded, the framers of our Constitution were vehemently opposed to militarism and empire. They thought that was the death knell of a free society. They didn't want a standing army. They made it virtually impossible to go to war. You had to get all sorts of votes to do it. And they tied the president's hands so he couldn't do anything without all sorts of approval. Because they looked at Britain, they looked at France, they looked at ancient Greece and Rome, and they saw that militarism and empire destroyed the prospects of democracy and popular rule everywhere where it became dominant. And they knew that would happen in the United States. They knew it was going to be a wealthy country. It's pretty obvious when you checked out the continent they were sitting on. It was just a matter of time till they were going to be a big dog. And even an elected government's going to have the temptation to become a military power. Only the press system could prevent that, because the population would be opposed to losing democracy, and militarism invariably led to the end of democracy, and when the effects of the internet really kicked in. And what's happened now and made this crisis permanent is that the internet has killed the commercial news journalism model in the United States and has damaged it, I think, probably irreparably worldwide, because the internet has given advertisers an alternative way to reach their target audience. where they don't have to subsidize journalism or any other media content anymore. They can go to Google or Facebook or Microsoft or AOL, and they simply say, we want our target audience. We want 27 million men between 25 and 34 who might be in the market for an automobile. And they know, thanks to Edward Snowden, we now know they know exactly how to find those 27 million men online. And they don't have to pay the newspaper website to reach them. They'll find them wherever they are. It could be at a soccer website. It could be at another advertiser's website. And what that means is huge amounts of public life are no longer covered. State government's hardly covered. Most Americans, when there are elections at the local level, there's almost no news coverage of the elections. Almost all the journalism goes to cover glamour races like the presidency, and most of the coverage is the name. It's superficial. And what you get in America is this whole crisis of fake news. Well, the crisis of fake news exists not simply because of Twitter and the ability of people to spin their stories independent of journalism, but because there isn't that much real news. There isn't that much news to say, well, that's fake news because here's the real stuff. The real stuff is also, looks like it's full of spin. Looks like it's not covering everything accurately. It looks like it's got its own agenda. My mind is astounded at the quality of the work we're seeing and the dedication of these young journalists, oftentimes working for almost no money, breaking stories. But it's painful at the same time, because I know that most of these kids aren't going to be able to stay in the field. And then we have more people who want to be journalists today than ever before in the United States. Even though it's like wanting to be, a coal miner here. I mean, it seems like there's no future for the job, but they desperately want to do it for the right reasons. They don't want to do this because they want to get rich. They'd be studying to be a hedge fund dude then. They're studying because they believe in it. That when our U.S. Supreme Court has actually formally considered the role of a free press in our society, the constitutional role, they have always argued that it's the first job of the federal government to make sure we have a free press. As one Supreme Court decision said, the First Amendment is a structural requirement to create a free press, a structural requirement. We have to have it. If we don't have it, everything else collapses. The system can't work. And I think that's the moment we're at now. We need the government to return to its democratic duties and create the resources so that great talent can do journalism. And here's how it would work, roughly, in the United States if we adopted it, or in any country with their own version. Everyone over 18 in the United States would be given the right to spend $200 of government money on any nonprofit, non-commercial news medium of their choice. They have $200. Give it all to one group, or they could split it up to a bunch, and it would be government money. It wouldn't be their money. Every adult would have that right, a voucher. And they could not do it at all. They could just say, I elect not to do it. It's purely optional, and who gets the money is purely their choice. And the crucial factors about this would be this. Everything produced by any news medium group, let's say you had a cooperative of 35 journalists who wanted to cover their Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania better. They were disappointed with the collapse of commercial journalism in Pittsburgh. Those journalists get together and start their cooperative. Anything they produced with the money they received in these vouchers would have to be made available to everyone for free immediately online. And anyone else can use it. Any other medium could pick it up and publish it. It would instantly go in the public domain. So the public subsidy wouldn't be to create stuff that would be protected by copyright and put behind barbed wire and private property. What was produced with that would instantly go in the public domain. The idea would be that there would be competition for these, that every year that you could switch who you gave your support to, so you couldn't rest on your laurels. And I think when we came up with this plan, the place where we were convinced it was most suitable was for local journalism. Both of them said to me, they said, your voucher idea is the only thing we've ever heard that could possibly solve this. So it is. And both of them said, but we could never say that. We would end our political careers. It's just not permissible to say that in America today. It works. We just have to look at history. The evidence is in on that. But the job is in front of us, and I wish you all the luck in solving it. Thank you very much.
Issues that I got involved in a few years ago with Edinburgh University, their law wing, was how do we restore trust in the media? How do we re-engage the public with the media? What is required? Do we need to look at the standards? Do we need to look at the ethics? Do we need to look at people's reason for disengaging with parts of the media? And how do we get them engaging again? And I think people are hungry for facts. They're looking for political and commercial arguments to be put that are accurate, that they're not fake news, that they are based on an element of scientific data, scientific discussion, political discussion. It's not going to be perfect, but I do think that the role of the press in dealing with the democratic deficit is essential.
However, it's not just that there's been a number of elections or referendums, it's the scale and the importance that the public are being asked to consider of these issues in these votes. And the scale of the issues that people are having to address have also been massive. Journalists and the media in all its forms are absolutely vital to these democratic processes. We want certainty and we want clarity, and we want clarity to come from making sure that there is information that is shared, that there is facts, and that there's informed opinion, both written and indeed read. And we want the Scottish public to make an informed choice based on a reasoned assessment of all available information. And to quote Irish-American politician Daniel Patrick Moynihan, everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not his own facts. Your role is essential to our democracy. And it's to help explore those arguments and to call out when people in positions of power and influence are playing fast and loose with the facts. Scotland was a home to the Enlightenment and is respected internationally as a place of evidence-based rational discourse. I think we need to hold on to that very firmly. And in my discussions across Europe in recent years, we do have a respect in terms of what we can do in terms of our leadership of that rational evidence-based discourse, which is the heart of our civic society. And I realise that following circulations of traditional newspapers is a significant concern, presents a significant and considerable challenge to the industry. I'm encouraged that online circulation seems to be increasing, but I realise that this does not yet compensate for the reduction in the circulation of print editions. And it's perhaps ironic that some of the trends that are creating these challenges are the same ones which increase our access to news. Social and digital media certainly democratise access to information. We know what's going on around the world in real time, and we hear about it from a huge range of sources, including individual citizens. And while current debates about fake news demonstrate that there remain significant questions about the misuse of digital media, that wealth of information literally at our fingertips must in principle only be a good thing. There are, however, disruptive technologies which challenge traditional business models in the media, and I think these are the issues that we have to grapple with and think through. I had a very interesting conversation recently with John McClellan from the Scottish Newspaper Society, during which we discussed the role of the newspaper industry in our wider creative industries policy. And the creative industries are one of Scotland's key growth sectors. And John's thoughts on how the newspaper industry links with the wider creative industries on a number of fronts were very pertinent in this changing context. And John reminded me that the press is now one of the biggest investors in the digital platform. So as the focus of the industry shifts and diversifies away from print journalism, although that clearly remains an important medium, especially in local communities, it is welcome that the industry is considering what new networks, relationships it needs to build. And as a government, we are here to support that. I would encourage you to engage with the public sector and the wider creative industry sector on issues of shared interest. So we welcome the new channel, and we must ensure that it will continue to press for it to have the funding it needs to match the ambitions that BBC Scotland staff have for it. 8 years ago, the Scottish Broadcasting Commission estimated a similar type channel would cost around 75 million a year, more than double and I want to invite you to bring your ideas on how we might support you to develop, better understand the needs and challenges you face. Finances, public finances are very tight. I've had to deal with reducing budgets across all my portfolio, but I have hoped in my cultural responsibilities kept that lifeblood of making sure that we have a vibrant sector in terms of the quality of the content, and I think we should look with hope. So though technology and digital platforms are challenging, some of the most fundamentals of the importance of democracy and journalists and free speech are still with us. And I sometimes wonder that we always think that we've only just invented or only just discovered challenges in crisis. And if you think about the Greeks and the historical perspective of ethos, pathos and logos, Perhaps logos is what we've been used to in terms of both journalism and democracy over the last 50 years, but also ethos and pathos have never gone away, and perhaps all we're seeing in terms of where we are, in terms of the perspective, whether it's of the Kardashians or whatever, is that something around pathos, how we identify with people or celebrities. Ethos is always important. But there's that kind of point about maybe we haven't just, these challenges, when people talk about post-truth, I refuse to use the term post-truth. I think there's a kind of point about these aspects. People have always, for generations and for centuries, and if you look at the Greeks and Greek writing in terms of politicians from thousands of years ago, we've always had to deal with how do we get our message across. It is to save our local paper and the local advertising or whatever in it. And it comes back to that economic model. Should the government provide and subsidise market failure? Is that actually what we should? Are we saying that because of the reduction in newspapers, that's we're subsidising market failure, or do we take that step and that leap and say, well, what we do want to do, taking Robert's point about there actually is a market out there, is how do we grow the market and find ways of taking the increase in the market and reinvesting it back in the industry?